Hi, my name's Gian, and I'm here to speak about how security and accessibility can be friends at Conf42 DevOps 2026. I'm coming to you from Australia, and firstly, I would like to acknowledge the Yuggera people as the traditional owners of this land who still have a strong attachment to the land I'm currently on. This presentation can be accessed at the Accessibility Oz conferences page, which is at www.accessibilityoz.com/about/conferences. If you go to the Accessibility Oz website, you can see the About section at the top here, select About and then select Conferences. You can see that I have an upcoming conference, which is Conf42 DevOps. That will be moved to under Past Conferences and Events, and you can access all the information that I talk about here. This is a photo of our team at CSUN in 2018, which is, wow, 8 years ago now, which is kind of terrifying if you think about it. This is about 2/3 of my team. And one of the things that I wanted to do when I started Accessibility Oz is I wanted to support people by employing people with disabilities, as well as, of course, making accessible websites and doing accessible testing. So over the last 15 years, almost 15 years that we've been operating, we've never had under less than 60% of our staff having some kind of significant disability that affects their daily life. And if you have a look at us, we all look quote unquote normal. And that's important to realize that people with disabilities are often hidden in plain sight. You won't know if someone has a disability. Please don't ask. It's very rude. Now, over the, as I said, almost 15 years that we've been operating, we've had staff with dyslexia, moderate vision impairment, severe vision impairment, epilepsy, migraines, physical impairment, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, post-traumatic stress disorder, autism, and long COVID. I myself have long COVID, which has definitely put a pin in my traveling to conferences, but I still try and participate as I can. Another thing to realize is that it's not just about vision impairments. A lot of people, especially if they're new to accessibility, talk only about screen reader accessibility. That's absolutely important and essential. But the largest group of people with disabilities who use the web are actually people with cognitive disabilities. So it's really important to involve all people with disabilities when you're talking about accessibility. So a little bit about me. Why should you believe anything I have to say? Well, I started in 1998. I like to say, I know if you've seen a presentation from me before, you will have heard this joke a number of times, but I like to say I started when I was 5 years old, but that's not actually the case. I worked on the first accessible website in Australia, and I created Australia's first automated accessibility testing tool. I spent 6 years as an invited expert to the W3C WCAG 2 working group, working on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2. I worked on the Melbourne 2006 Commonwealth Games and every Commonwealth Games since then. And I spent 5 years managing usability and accessibility services at Monash University. I left Monash University in 2011 and I founded Accessibility Oz. We released the products OzPlayer and OzArt. I spoke at the United Nations on web accessibility in 2015. I was inducted into the Australia's Hall of Fame as Accessibility Person of the Year in 2019, and I am currently the chair of the Mobile Accessibility Testing Guidelines. So let's get into it. Let's talk about security. So I want to start with an anecdote. In 2018, Angus Taylor, who's an Australian politician, produced a PDF which said that the City of Sydney's annual travel budget was $15 million. So who cares if the annual travel budget for a city council is $15 million? Angus Taylor had been criticising the Lord Mayor of Sydney over emissions based on this PDF. And so supposedly the City of Sydney's annual report, which is available on their website, said that the City of Sydney spent over $15 million worth of travel when, if you looked at the actual original PDF, it was only $6,000. So council proved that the annual report on the website, firstly, had never changed, had always said that they'd only spent $6,000 on international travel, and that Angus Taylor had produced a doctored PDF. So, why is this important? This is important because a lot of people think that the reason to use a PDF is security. You need to use a PDF because no one can change it, and therefore it's a secure format. But that's really not the case if you look at this particular example. It's very easy to alter a PDF, and it's something that I'm sure a lot of us have already done. So, in our Disability Discrimination Advisory Notes, which is an Australian document, they specified that some file formats provide mechanisms for enhancing the security of documents by preventing unauthorized editing, copying, or printing. Some of these mechanisms are not compatible with accessibility for people with this disability, and document authors should ensure that security features do not prevent access to the document by assistive technology. So this is basically turning the security feature on and off with PDFs. This is not an issue anymore, but it is something that has been talked about. If there are concerns about ensuring the authenticity of material published on the web in multiple formats, then a statement should be included that specifies which format is to be regarded as definitive or authorized, and noting that additional formats are being provided to maximize access. But if we think about it, what's more secure than a PDF? And of course, I know none of you can answer me, but what's more secure than a PDF? An HTML web page on your website. I can tell you right now that I can doctor a PDF that you give me, but I cannot hack into your website and change the data that's on your website. So the City of Sydney could prove that that PDF was doctored because they had uploaded one document and one document only to the CMS, and they could prove through the CMS details that that document hadn't changed. So once again, something that you might think you need to use because of a security provision is not actually the case. Now you know that PDFs are not a way to provide secure information. An HTML website is. Let's talk about CAPTCHA. I know a lot of security consultants, and the argument I always have with them is about CAPTCHA. So CAPTCHA is basically a way to make sure that bots don't fill out your forms and submit them with, random information. Now, when it comes to WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, there is a specific requirement regarding CAPTCHA under 1.1.1 non-text content. And it says all non-text content that is presented to the user has a text alternative that serves the equivalent purpose, except for the situations listed below. And one of those situations is the CAPTCHA. If the purpose of non-text content is to confirm that content is being accessed by a person rather than a computer, then text alternatives that identify and describe the purpose of the non-text content are provided, and alternative forms of CAPTCHA using output modes for different types of sensory perception are provided to accommodate different disabilities. But despite what the W3 says, or because of it, which we'll see in a moment, every CAPTCHA is inaccessible. Every CAPTCHA. Yes, even Google's one. Yes, even Google's one. Especially Google's one. And the reason why is because the reCAPTCHA that Google has created only pops up if it thinks you're a bot. Guess what? Always comes across as a bot. A screen reader. So it will always be triggered when a screen reader user comes along. And the Google's reCAPTCHA does not have an audio reCAPTCHA, or the audio reCAPTCHA is so bad it is inaccessible. So I have a number of friends who cannot use the Google reCAPTCHA. And funnily enough, despite what Success Criterion 1.1.1 says, the W3C agrees. And this is from their document about CAPTCHAs, and I will tell you what it says. CAPTCHAs are a controversial topic in the accessibility community. As is described in the paper Inaccessibility of CAPTCHA, CAPTCHAs intrinsically push the edges of human abilities in an attempt to defeat automated processes. Every type of CAPTCHA will be unsolvable by users with certain disabilities. However, they are widely used, and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Working Group believes that if CAPTCHAs were forbidden outright, websites would choose not to conform to WCAG rather than abandon CAPTCHA. So basically, they're saying, hey, we allow you to have CAPTCHA because we really want you to follow WCAG, even though we all know that it's not an accessible feature. Websites abandoning WCAG would create barriers for a great many more users with disabilities. For this reason, the working group has chosen to structure the requirement about CAPTCHA in a way that meets the needs of most people with disabilities, yet is also considered adoptable by sites. Requiring two different forms of CAPTCHA on a given site ensures that most people with disabilities will find a form they can use. Because some users with disabilities will still not be able to access sites that meet the minimum requirements, the working group provides recommendations for additional steps. Organisations motivated to conform to WCAG should be aware of the importance of this topic and should go as far beyond the minimum requirements of the guidelines as possible. Also, if you think about it, an audio capture, which is where you press a little button and it says J, Q, capital C, is also inherently inaccessible. So firstly, most bots can interpret speech, so the audio is often quite distorted and therefore quite inaccessible. And also, audio captures are one and done. It's very transient. You hear it once and it's done, whereas a visual capture is persistent. It's always there and you can look at it, whereas audio capture, you hear it once and it's gone. Therefore, it's going to be inaccessible to users who have memory problems or people who don't have memory problems and just can't remember a string of 6 letters. And then the method to turn on the audio capture may not be accessible. The next thing to talk about is accessible authentication. Now, this was included in WCAG 2.2, which was released in October 2023, and they're going even further. And they're saying, basically, captions are inaccessible again. So the requirement, this is at AA, so this is something that everyone needs to follow. The requirement is 3.3.8, accessible authentication minimum standard. A cognitive function test, such as remembering a password or solving a puzzle, is not required for any step in an authentication process unless that step provides at least one of the following: an alternative, so another authentication method that does not rely on a cognitive function test. Mechanism, a mechanism is available to assist the user in completing the cognitive function test. Object recognition, the cognitive function test is to recognize objects and go, hey, that's reCAPTCHA, that's great. And I have something to say about that in a moment. And personal content, the cognitive function test is to identify non-text content the user provided to the website. So the user uploaded a photo and you show them 6 photos, they have to choose the one that they've uploaded. And they say within this requirement, if a CAPTCHA is used as a part of an authentication process, there must be a method that does not include a cognitive function test unless it meets the exception. If the test is based on something the website has set, such as remembering or transcribing a word or recognizing a picture the website provided, that would be a cognitive function test. Recognizing objects or a picture that the user has provided is a cognitive function test. However, it is accepted at the AA level. An object in this context, which is allowed, an object in this context means the general English definition, a material thing that can be seen and touched, and can include vehicles and animals. If the test goes beyond recognition, e.g. multiply the number of cats by the number of dogs, that does not meet the exception. But it does go further. Says some forms of object recognition may require an understanding of a particular culture. For example, taxis can appear differently in different locales. Therefore, this is an issue for many people, including people with disabilities, but it is not considered an accessibility-specific issue, which is interesting because it's basically saying, hey, we know people aren't going to be able to use it, but you can use it. will allow you. So this requirement seems to specifically allow Google reCAPTCHA. But if you look back on that W3C CAPTCHA document, you'll see that they still say it's completely inaccessible. So really, you have to avoid CAPTCHA. Don't use CAPTCHA. So everyone convinced? CAPTCHA's bad. CAPTCHA's bad. Non-CAPTCHA's good. So what do you do instead? If you must have a CAPTCHA, you must provide more than 2 modalities of CAPTCHA for a given action and make sure they work. And so if you have an audio CAPTCHA, make sure it's something that the user can repeat, put in an email and they'll send the CAPTCHA to you, that kind of stuff. Or provide access to a human customer service representative, notice I say human, who can bypass the CAPTCHA, or do not require CAPTCHAs for authorized users. Better alternatives are multi-factor authentication, human test questions, i.e. is fire hot or cold? The person has to write hot. Is grass green or purple? They have to be very basic questions. Honeypot traps, which are fields that must be left blank. They're hidden from all users. Make sure they're hidden from screen reader users as well. And if they're filled out, then don't accept the form. There's also things like server-side spam filters, server-side validation. Other options include things like a confirmation page, screen after the form submission that says, here's your information. Are you happy to submit this? Timestamp your forms. If the form is submitted faster than humanly possible, odds are it's a spam bot. Proof of work, JavaScript code, heuristics of the user, limited use accounts. So there's a lot of different ways, and that's only some of them. If you need to convince someone else without making them watch this presentation, have a look at tinyurl.com/A11Y CAPTCHA. So that's tinyurl.com/A11Y CAPTCHA. Okay, so let's talk about forms. There's a bunch of different WCAG requirements that can be quite complicated, including 2.2.1 timing adjustable, 3.3.1 error identification, 3.3.3 error suggestion, 3.3.4 error prevention, legal financial data, 3.3.7 redundant entry, and 3.3.8 accessible authentication minimum, which we just talked about. So I'm going to go through and give you some examples of these so you know not what to do, or you know what not to do. First is 2.2.1 timing adjustable. For each time limit that is set by the content, at least one of the following is true. 1, turn off. The user is allowed to turn off the time limit before encountering it. 2, adjust. The user is allowed to adjust the time limit before encountering it over a wide range that is at least 10 times the length of the default setting. Or 3, extend. The user is warned before time expires and given at least 20 seconds to extend the time limit with a simple action. For example, press the spacebar, and the user is allowed to extend the time limit at least 10 times. Or 4, real-time exception. The time limit is a required part of a real-time event, for example, an auction, and no alternative to the time limit is possible. So this is an example here. It's an iPhone app, and it's about to time out, and it gives you a little pop-up, and it says, do you want 1 more minute? Remind me in 15 minutes, or ignore the limit for today. So it provides both options to turn off or extend the timeout. Or here is another example, a pop-up that says, are you still working? And it's got a little timer starting from 1 minute and it's counting down. You are about to be logged out due to inactivity, and there are 2 buttons, log out and keep working. This is another example. Want to stay logged in? You are about to be logged out due to inactivity. 2 buttons, sign out, stay logged in. Time remaining before sign off, 1 minute and 28 seconds. And there are 2 more exceptions, which is the essential exception, which is the time limit is essential and extending it would invalidate the activity. So, for example, think of a CPR test. You can't give someone extra time, to save someone's life. They have to do it within the first minute or etc. That's an example of an essential timeout. or a 20-hour exception. The time limit is longer than 20 hours. So the next requirement is 3.3.1 error identification. If an input error is automatically detected, the item that is in error is identified and the error is described to the user in text. So this is an example here. It looks like there's an error message, but quite frankly, it's not very helpful. So you can see the card number there is not a real card number. The error message says, please enter your payment information to continue, when the error message should really say, your card number should be 16 digits or something along those lines. But that kind of error that we see there is at least better than this error, which is invalid product 893B94AFCA9D 4FOF9201 6D426CEDAAFC available. You see how annoying that was? That's what a screen reader would read. And that's only, the top 3 lines of, say, a 20-line error message. So definitely provide better error messages than that. The next requirement is 3.3.3 error suggestion. If an input error is automatically detected and suggestions for correction are known, then the suggestions are provided to the user unless it would jeopardize the security or purpose of the content. So note that it says if you can't provide suggestions because it would jeopardize the security of the content, then you don't have to. So WCAG has thought about security. This is an example here. Please enter birth year in 4 digits, e.g. 1974. So it's the e.g. that is the error suggestion. And so people can see that their birth year of 81 is not okay because they have to put 19 before it. Also, if it's a common mistake, then, make that clear to the user and tell them what they need to do. Here it says error, unknown error. Check the detailed error for more information. I mean, that's not great. But here it says candidate has already been invited to take the same test. If you want to re-invite, cancel the invite in your hacker rank for work account first. So it tells you exactly what you need to do. So that's an error suggestion as well. And then we have 3.3.4, error prevention, legal financial data. For web pages that cause legal commitments or financial transactions for the user to occur that modify or delete user controllable data in data storage systems, or that submit user test responses, at least one of the following is true. 1, reversible, so submissions are reversible. 2, checked, data entered by the user is checked for input errors and the user is provided an opportunity to correct them. And 3, confirmed. A mechanism is available for reviewing, confirming, and correcting information before finalizing the submission. So this is especially important if someone's going to delete something. So having a pop-up or something along the lines of this, which says, are you sure you want to delete this post? Cancel or delete. Are you sure you want to publish this post? Etc. Those are the kind of things that you need to add. Or a page which shows everything and says, hey, is this what you want to submit? So next we have redundant entry, information previously entered by or provided to the user that is required to be entered again in the same process is either auto-populated or available for the user to select, except when re-entering the information is essential, the information is required to ensure the security of the content, or previously entered information is no longer valid. So once again, this is something that you can do, but if it's going to mess with your security too much, you don't need to do it. And so the kind of example here is autocomplete. Having autocomplete for email, password, address, that kind of stuff is going to make using your forms a whole lot more accessible and shouldn't mess with your security too much. So thank you for coming today. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was useful. Please feel free to have a look at this presentation again at accessibilityoz.com/about/conferences. And if you need any accessibility help, we're happy to help you wherever you are in the world. We have clients everywhere in the world. You can check us out on accessibilityoz.com or email us at inquiries, ENQUIRIES, Or if you want to spell it the American way, you can. It'd still get to us, inquiries@accessibilityoz.com. Thank you very much for your time.